Welcome, everyone. While we wait for Danielle to join us, I'm just going to drop the question that Danielle will be responding to in the chat. Oh, there you go. Welcome, Danielle. I was sharing with the group that I'm just going to drop the question that you'll be responding to in the chat for this 5 minutes, and we're right on time at 2:05. And I'll give you, when we get close, I'll give you a 1-minute signal.
Great. I will go ahead and start us off. Thank you so much for being with us today. So I'm here to talk about the movement I'm a part of, which is the movement to end mass incarceration, and our deeply held belief at Common Justice that we will never succeed in achieving that goal unless we take on the issue of violence. That's partly because half of the people locked up in this country are locked up for crimes of violence. But it is more than that. It's because the stories that we have been told about who commits harm, that lies we've been fed about some imagined monstrous other that lead us to choose prisons over schools and prisons over roads and prisons over, for instance, a public health infrastructure that could distribute a vaccine effectively, to pick a random example. That story is this story of this imagined monstrous other that is as old and frankly as racist as our country. And we believe that if we don't come for that story, no matter how much we water the plants, like however much we trim the leaves, like we'll be spilling water from our buckets and feeding it at its roots. We as a movement have made a lot of narrative mistakes in this regard. People fighting to free people for nonviolent crimes have thrown people who commit violence under the bus by running campaigns that win not primarily by uplifting the virtue of their campaign, but by comparing the people they fight for to some other group they portray as worse. We've talked about prison working or not working, but never fully held prison accountable to the fact that it is generative and productive of violence. We minimize violence. We say there's not so much, it's not too bad, it wasn't really violent. And what that sounds like to the communities whose lives are at stake in our work is that there is some normal amount of Black death that should be tolerable to us. And every time we feed into that story by minimizing the frequency and seriousness of harm, we separate ourselves from the people who would otherwise fight most strongly for that transformation. And we fight fear with data, and data doesn't ever beat fear. There's a reason that if my toddler thinks there is a monster under the bed, I do not tell him there is a 95% chance that there isn't. That is not the road for either of us to sleep. And so we keep doing the same things that we've done that lost us this fight in the 80s and 90s and since, and we need more moves. At Common Justice, we have some ideas of what those moves are, what we can do instead. First, we can affirm the wrongfulness of harm and violence. We can acknowledge its prevalence, and we can use that prevalence to contextualize the failure and harm of our current responses. We can say that even the lowest rates of crime we have ever seen are intolerably high for the people who have survived that violence or lost their loved ones to it. And we can make clear that those rates in Black and Brown communities have never approximated the relative levels of safety wealthy white people can expect. We can make clear that prevalence happens in the context of our existing approach to police and punishment, where no nation in its history has ever used either at the scale we do now. That if they worked, we would be the safest nation in human history, and Black and Brown neighborhoods would be Edenic havens where harm was almost unimaginable. And we can make clear that the violence we experience results from our exclusive reliance on these strategies, and we can be the people who care most about our safety, more than our opposition. The second thing we can do is we can reclaim survivors' seats at the table. At most tables, there's a seat for survivors and a seat for law enforcement, and they're respectively occupied by a prosecutor and a police officer. We can say that they can have the law enforcement seat, but the survivor's seat will belong to survivors. And what we know is that when you ask survivors what they want something that works. And very few survivors actually believe prison is that thing. They have paid the price for its failure with their enduring pain. It's why 90% of survivors of serious violence who are offered a choice between the person who hurt them in prison or common justice choose us. And lastly, we can advance an affirmative vision. We can advance a vision of the world that we want to live in, the world that people deserve. We can uplift solutions to violence, and I'll share here a screen of our recent report that portrayed 18 different groups that are solving violence in real time on the ground all across the country, and that represent the world that not only we can imagine, but that some of us are beginning to live in, and with the right resources and the right power and the right organizing can become all of our norm. We know, my mentor growing up used to always say, it's hard to get people to fight for a shit sandwich easy on the shit. And I think often our movement we want 10 years instead of 20. We want a misdemeanor instead of a felony. And what we are saying at Common Justice is what happens, not just if we ask for a PB&J, what if we fight for a whole, nourishing, nutritious meal? And if we fight for
Really quickly, the Akonadi Foundation is a racial justice foundation based in Oakland. Our values include racial justice, communities of color and leadership, intersectionality, a term borrowed from Black feminist scholar Kimberly Williams Crenshaw, leadership from the field, from the people, and cultural expression. Quickly, what we do is we have an All In for Oakland initiative, which is a closed fund, but it was very directed on our youth justice and education justice work happening here in Oakland, California. We do have an open fund called So Love Can Win. This will reopen in 2022. There are $10,000 general operating grants to groups that have real roots here in Oakland, doing cultural work, voice or journalism concerning communities of color and power building, organizing, and healing. And we also do partnership work. So we get together with other foundations to try to raise more money for our folks. And there's the California Black Freedom Fund that was launched just last year, and Belonging in Oakland Fund, which is actually funded partly by CERDNA, or primarily by CERDNA. And we do that with the City of Oakland and East Bay Community Foundation. So I just wanted to lift up Akonadi's approach, our value to thinking about culture. And what we state is that culture is an essential component of power building. Through culturally affirming spaces and narratives, people and movements build their strength and come to understand their relationship to each other and to the generations that preceded and will follow them. I want to talk to you really quickly about some research that we have conducted around culture that is concerned about counteracting structural racism, right? So this was a couple of years ago now, I think it was 2018, that we did this mapping small arts and culture organizations of color in Oakland. What we wanted to do is make visible all of the rich cultural work happening in Oakland, because what we were hearing from our fellow funders was we don't really know these folks of color, where are they? What do they do? And we're oh my God, there's so many. And we could be a mic for them, but this is where we felt research is important to say, here are our people, here are all the wonderful things that they're doing to really keep the spirit and the cultural sustenance alive in Oakland. And what are the practices really of really a culture of movement building and power building in Oakland. So I invite you to take a look at that report. Again, these are Oakland organizations, and we did this in partnership with the local foundation and a group of researchers listed here. Next, this is a project that we launched actually this year. It was a research project essentially to profile artists in Oakland. We called it Creative Space, so that creatives in place. So we wanted to create something beautiful that really showed the plethora of artists that are both from Samoan, Fa'afafenge, which is the third gender dancer, to Nke Oruche with the Afro-Urban Society, who is, a Nigerian woman really coalescing a community of both Africans from the continent and then Black people here in the US, and creating those bridges to create a dynamic place of belonging and culture and art here. So this was a really wonderful project. And what we asked them is just to speak about their needs and what they were visioning for our futures. And it was a really beautiful project, and something that we felt we could amplify. These are our folks. These are our folks that are really lighting the torch for what we need and what we want in our communities. And I wanted to just give you a sense of Oakland. I think Oakland has a reputation that kind of precedes itself, right? We have the Segurate Land Trust. We have the indigenous folks of this land. The Black Panther Party was born here in Oakland. There's a mural honoring the Malonga Cascalord and other other local artists who have contributed greatly to really Black pride, Indigenous pride. And it's like, we would never like assume that brand is like, or that concept is shared across the world, really, right? And Oakland, but doing organizing within Oakland, these are some of the folks that add to that kind of vision, right? Of like what we want to see, how we want to belong, that counters really racist ideas of who we are, and really offers us a place of belonging. I also included ball culture here, which is of course like a very, you know, foundational thing in New York, and we also have had a ball culture here in Oakland as well. And so the idea is like, what offers us a space to belong here in Oakland? What are ways that we seek to affirm ourselves and take space and have expression in a way that celebrates our cultures and identities? What I wanted to do here is give you a sense of what our local grant partners are doing to engage culture as a way to affect narrative shift and counter structural racism, affect policy change, and really starting at the root with why we belong here as people of color, right? So first we have the Black Organizing Project, who is one of the folks that are part of this cohort of people. And of course, many of you probably heard that last year they were able to dismantle the Oakland Schools Police Department, which was a huge win. And part of like the question that they anchored in, and they talk a lot about, and you can speak to them directly, but about how culture was at the core of saying, you know, this is who we are as Black people. This is how we want to love and come together, whether it's through spirit, ceremony, food, and through that kind of like building and community building emerged their Black Sanctuary Pledge, right? So the idea that schools should be a place, communities should be a place of Black sanctuary where where grandmas and students, young people, and parents can all find a place to belong. And what does that mean in practice? And how do they actually challenge folks who are not Black to say, how are we all creating a space for Black sanctuary, for belonging of people of color? And so in many ways, I would, you know, Oakland, I mean, BOP is thought of as an organizing group, which they very much are. And I think we've come to know that they are actually a cultural group as well, right? That's asserting a space for Black people and Black pride and belonging. Here we have 67 Sueños, which is a youth organizing group, primarily working with undocumented Latinx students, but not exclusively. So it's both like Muslim and Black youth here in Oakland. And this is a beautiful mural that they created, which is a campaign that says, no human being is illegal. Everyone has a dream, right? And so there's an idea of like, you know, our undocumented brothers and sisters often have to hide. And what does it look like? Or, you know, what does it look like to create a place of not only belonging, but like power for folks to really assert that their needs as people living here in the States. Lastly, I wanted to just share with you this wonderful project called The Black Woman is God. Karen Senefru's, she's a local artist here from Oakland, and she just created this space that was just epic and really resonated worldwide. And it's about ceremony and art making, centering Black women, and really expanding this space of like, when you come to Oakland, there is a sense that this is a place of Black pride and belonging and beauty. And, you know, today we're just meditating on like why these cultural spaces really give us the bridge to the fight, right? The bridge to when we have to assert our needs within racist systems, right? So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what we've learned, and I'll move quickly, so we're almost wrapping up here. But this is kind of what's been referred to as like the power flower, right? So then with organizing at the middle, we have research, communications and narrative shift, alliance building, leadership development, org development, advocacy and policy. And what we're asserting is that actually culture, art, and healing kind of is the sun that kind of allows each of the petals in the flower, and of course the center, to bloom. And part of what we're saying is that how does culture and healing really show up in these different spaces? So I just have a few examples here in organizational and leadership development. it really looks like staff wellness, right? What do staff need to be staff and organizers need to sustain themselves in really challenging work at times, right? So culturally relevant or indigenous healing practices, ceremony, and also time away to experience like joy and like get us back to where we are. Earlier, I thought to ask you guys all like what brings you joy, and oftentimes what it is that comes up is music and food and gathering. And so so I'll move on to one of the other petals, but it's communication, right? And we've heard a lot today about storytelling and creative production, narrative shift that amplifies the visions of our movements and really paints the pictures of where we want to be and belong. And of course, within alliance and coalition building, we look to culture to like be the visioning space, right? And be the connector, be the concerts and the things that motivate us, and to have shared cultural and celebration, and also to kind of like interrogate harder things like appropriating people's culture or campaigns, right? And creating some ideas on how we should best navigate some of those harder spots, right? So just quickly, there's a few quite a bit actually, bullet points about why culture is central to racial justice, organizing, power building, and movement building. But one is, again, to repeat that culture affirms and celebrates through music, visual art, food, prayer, ceremony. It builds a sense of belonging, brings people together and nurtures bonds, creates practices that help people heal. And it's, cultural affirmation, loving who we are, where we come from, our histories, or, having critique of our histories too, it can counter the criminalization of people of color. Culture offers a place for restoration, right? For us to continue on this work. And culture and narrative shift, again, counteract racist ideas and allows our movements to build new narratives that shift power ultimately. And so this is like for funders, right? Because I think funders are learning on a learning curve, I would say, or maybe let's just say learning, they are headed towards affirm it, funding culture, right? Because oftentimes it's like, what's the transaction, what's the policy you want, all this kind of thing, but why is culture important too, right? So how can we speak about like why culture is central to this work? And so a lot of what we've seen and what we've noticed is that it allows organizers to engage their base through concerts, events, food, storytelling. It reinvigorates staff again and organizers, provides opportunity for healing, release, provides affirmation, joy, remembering, and is a way for us to vision. And again, we've heard more about building new narratives and then also thinking of culture as a strategy to make our movement strong, right? How might we engage it as a strategy? Thank you so much for today, and much love to you all and all the wonderful work you're doing.
Thank you, Vanessa. I want to thank you on behalf of AFF and the organizers for a wonderful presentation, and just for sharing with us and giving us that funder perspective about how it is really moving movement. So just want to lift you and appreciate you as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. I wasn't making time for Q&A or anything, right? It was just like present and then breakout rooms.
Yeah, and if anyone has questions, you can drop them in the chat. We're also collecting questions for folks to respond to later as part of our follow-up. So if at any point you have any questions as a presenter or as an audience member, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We are collecting them for responses. Thank you so much.
Welcome, Tzigane and Padres team. Anahi, thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
How are you doing? Can you hear us okay? Okay, awesome. Cool. And y'all can see our screen, right?
You might want to.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I think we are ready to start. So hi, everyone. My name is Tzigane Martin. I use she, her, ella pronouns, and I'm the communications and digital coordinator here at Padres, Jovenes, Unidos.
Hi everyone, I'm Anahi. I use she, her, ella pronouns, and I am the social media intern here at PJU.
Yeah, so just to give a little background, we are Padres y Jovenes Unidos. Padres y Jovenes Unidos is a multi-issue organization based in Denver, Colorado, led by people of color who work for educational equity, racial justice, immigrant rights, and advocating for equal access to achieve a better quality of life. Our freedom to learn framework is based on the belief that education is a right, not a privilege. We believe that all students, regardless of race, income, or immigration status, deserve equal access to high-quality public schools that prepare them for college. And first, we're just going to jump into a little bit on how we use TikTok and what we use TikTok for in terms of our organization.
First off, a lot of people think of TikTok just as pure entertainment, but actually TikTok is an important tool to educate and call people into action. And that way that we use TikTok is as a platform to teach our audience about topics like the school to prison to deportation pipeline and the importance of police-free schools. We also transform broader topics and stories, as well as research and data, to something that is comprehensible and engaging to a younger audience. And we also draw inspiration from TikTok trends and apply that to our narrative. And the following is going to be a TikTok we created on the topic of the school to prison to deportation pipeline and the impact of gang affiliation labels to Latinx undocumented youth.
We're just going to show it now.
Unidos, and welcome back to part 2 of episode 3.
Can y'all hear it when it plays? Okay, perfect.
Yes. Hi, my name is Anahi with Padres Unidos, and welcome back to part 2 of episode 3 on the school to prison pipeline. Let's jump back into the school to deportation pipeline. Following the Trump administration, immigration officials began targeting youth of color by accusing them of being involved in gangs. Falsely accusing undocumented youth of gang involvement can lead to their detention, deportation, and blocks their ability to obtain legal status. A national study found that gang allegations are on the rise and predominantly used against undocumented Latinx youth. However, immigration agencies do not offer a clear definition of what gang involvement means, and these accusations often use evidence that is just vague and suspicious. The evidence primarily used in deportation hearings is the gang database, which provides details of individuals believed to be involved in gangs, but this database is often inaccurate. Other forms of evidence include things like social media posts, pictures showing hand signals like peace signs, tattoos, clothing displaying popular sports teams and brands like the Chicago Bulls and Nike, and hanging out with people believed to be in gangs. Several of the things used as evidence display normal ways of dressing, behavior, and popular youth culture that do not determine gang involvement. Therefore, gang allegations are often unfounded and wrongfully criminalize youth of color. To learn more, like and follow for part 3.
Awesome. Thank you guys for watching that. Let me just go back to the presentation. Cool.
I'm sorry, we have 10 seconds, please. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, just follow us on social media. We use TikTok as a way to build power and ultimately change the narrative.
Hey there.
Hey.
How's it going?
Darryl, you know, there's only 34 people left on the call, so I wonder what these breakout rooms are gonna look like. Think if we don't get anyone, maybe we'll just go back to the main room or the racial.
Okay.
I can see where folks like ends it up.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I don't know who's gonna come here.
I have to say, I am so impressed by what you and Manuela and Zaida are able to put together. Like, y'all are some badass women, I swear. Y'all are badass.
This was Manuela's vision and execution. So all credit to her. You know, we came in as the support team on this, but she really led the charge and was able to pull in some phenomenal speakers. So it's been great. It's been great.
Hi, Mary. I'm Darryl Hanna.
Hi, I'm Mary. I work with AFF with marketing and comms. So nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. I just joined AFF's board.
Oh, great. Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
so I'm new to the fam, but feeling very welcome.
Excellent. Yes,
Yeah.
you're right. This has been incredible. Well, welcome. I'm fine. I'm glad to meet you, but this has been
Yeah.
amazing. I've
Oh, this
learned
is amazing. Yeah.
so much. I've been trying to share with my team while it's happening, giving them little
Exactly.
nuggets of
In
all
real
of it.
time. I'm taking
Yeah.
notes in like 4 different places.
Yeah, me too. My phone, paper.
Exactly.
everything.
Here. So.
Hi, Ali. Am I saying that right?
Hi, yeah, it's Allie.
Ali. So wonderful to have you join us. Should we jump in? So
Yeah.
I'm gonna share 2 things. One, I want to share before we head out, because we'll be like closing out from this breakout room. I'm gonna share the evaluation link in the chat, and then maybe we can just have a discussion. Mary's joining us as a member of Andrew's Family Funds Comp team, and then Darryl, our comrade in arms, an AFF board member. So just wanted to share who you're in community with. All right, so we'll just jump right in. The first question we're hoping to reflect on, of the things presented, what's one thing you want to see your org do, and what would you need to do it?
So many things. So many things we need to do. I work for an organization, it's called the Atlantic Fellows for Racial Equity. And we're based at Columbia University and at the Nelson Mandela Foundation in South Africa. And something we're, I think, thinking about specifically is talking about like Black economic, or the economic power of people, of specifically people of color, but a lot of our work is around Black people, centering Black power and Black leadership. And so I think just like, really like, we talk about economics through like this lens of like data and dollars and cents, but as opposed to just like talking about the fact that some families don't have access to just like buying milk, right? Or like buying bread. So just connecting like real big economic things to like everyday decisions that people have to make, you know? And then, so how do we really kind of unpack that? And then obviously that impacts like how well children can be cared for and supported and loved and fed, to be honest with you. So I think that's one thing that I'm definitely sitting with, is like, how do we take some of these concepts that like make sense for us who do this work every day, who are in this steeped deeply in it, like how do we kind of translate a lot of what we're talking about and doing so that we're bringing other people along. So I think that's one thing I think we need to do better about, especially sometimes we get trapped in the whole like Columbia, Nelson Mandela kind of like cerebralness, and forget that sometimes it's just real people.
Thank you for that reflection. Ali, I'm gonna kick it to you.
Yeah, so I work for Movement for Family Power. So I think that I'm still kind of like brewing on like what exactly, you know, like I guess how to like synthesize what I learned today, but I know there were a few different things. Specifically, I think the speaker was named Intelligent Mischief, and like just they were talking about you know, like imagination and how important that is as a roadmap. And we at our organization, you know, we do have a campaign that's called Reimagine Support. And I think that it really like, it definitely like applies to that, especially as we're like, you know, like rethinking like our values and how we want to approach this campaign. And also like the graphics are like really beautiful and like inspiring. And so yeah, that really resonated. And also specifically you said that without rest, like without taking time to rest, there's no room for imagination. I had not thought of that. Like for me, I'm just like, I'm kind of like, go, 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 try to like get as much done as possible, etc. And like one of our values of our organization is art as like a means of like spreading the word about things. And so like without resting, like there's no space for that like artistic creation. But yeah, I definitely feel like I was taking notes like crazy, so I feel like there's a lot in there that I'm gonna take back to my group.
Thank you, Ali. And I hear you. You know, it was a kind of a rapid style in and out of Zoom. So you're definitely getting a lot of information. So I want to affirm that lots of folks are still kind of brewing using the language you use on all that we heard today and how it applies. And yeah, this, the concept of imagination as a roadmap and the need for rest, right? And I just want to affirm what Darryl said, like, how do we translate the data into tangible stories? Like, how do we translate data into heart stories, right? And like that being a connection, how do we make people feel it? I hear that. I'm gonna jump. We have about like 13 minutes together. So we'll just flow and keep it as a conversation.
That's good.
And then we'll also provide a recording. So if folks want to come back to this, we can always come back to the recording. For questions 2 and 3, I'll read them out, but I'll also drop them in the chat. As a field of people moving in the same direction, what does this field need collectively to shape narratives? Is there a shared strategy, staff, story, and/or vision? And what do you not need? So I'm going to drop it in here so we can, they're like 4 questions in one. So it's like, what do we collectively need? Do we have a shared strategy and vision? And then like, what don't we need?
I think if we had like, I don't know, I tussle with this, so I'm just gonna say it. This feels like a brave space. So I think like often we talk about how like the right is so organized and they're a machine and they've got like their talking points down, and no matter if the building's on fire, they're gonna stay on message. And like and then people often say that the left doesn't have like a cohesive voice, a cohesive strategy. But I think we do, but it's just like not organized. So I'm glad that this convening exists around particularly like youth narrative change and like elevating voices of youth and how to engage around that. And obviously the issues that touch young people touch all of our lives, so it's not just for them. And I would love to figure out a way for like there to be like more narrative tables that people could sit at, right? And like, and like when I was working in like around the marriage equality campaign, it's like there was like, an organization that was like dedicated to messaging, and one was dedicated to like the legal part of it. One was dedicated to like activations and like, showing up wherever people are going to show up. And so I think because our issues are sometimes dispersed or diffuse rather, like it can be hard to like understand like or drive like a single narrative. But I wish we had like some narrative that really works, that people, or particularly around our young people, that cut across politics, because kids shouldn't be politicized, but we know that they are,
Thank you for that. I'm going to kick it to you, Ali.
Yeah, so I wanted to like I guess affirm what you're saying, Darryl, and like it's I guess I was thinking about the whole like the right being like a well-oiled machine. And I feel like it's because it's such a like rigid mindset. Whereas like, maybe like, we have to be more open-minded and like have to understand that there's like nuance to things. And I think that makes the task kind of complicated. But I think that that's like ultimately kind of the beauty of it. Or it's like, we're not just like, no matter what, like, have these terrible narratives. So I guess going back to the question, what does this field need collectively to shape narratives? I think that it really is, it goes back to that imagination of like the kind of future that we want to be having. And I think kind of awareness of where everything intersects and like how it's this system affects this other system, and like it's all just so connected. So I think having the strategy is like having the political education of like understanding like how these things are all connected that leads to those actions. And I think that what we do not need, what do you not need? I think that, well, I guess I'd rather say like what we do need is like room for just like trial and error and like seeing what works, and like we need flexibility. We don't need like a rigid mindset. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I agree. I think one thing that I see in our movement, it's like, because the right does feel like this massive machine we're going up against, it feels like our messaging has to be perfect.
Yep.
Like, and it has to be perfect from the beginning, so an example is like, how everyone got detracted on defund, right? And like went down this whole rabbit hole and totally missed the message. You know what I mean? And then the narrative piece was about kind of like re-messaging the message. But I think that speaks to Ali's point of the stakes are so high that it feels as if we don't have room to try things out, or it, and we are, and it is a very nuanced movement. Ali really hit it on the head. We are, and that is the beauty of our movement, right? That it is nuanced, that it is intersectional, that it's not the right, it's everything that's opposite of the right. And so how do we make space? And I really like your suggestion, Darryl. Like, how do we make more tables? Like, how do we create more tables? How do we create more opportunities for learning, more opportunities for exchange, so that we are like on the same page, or at least on the same chapter, even if we're not seeing the same thing.
Exactly.
We're on the same chapter.
Exactly.
So I hear that. I definitely hear that. We have about 6 minutes left, and then for our final question, what can you offer others as a group of organizations who are in motion together? So when we thought of this question, we thought there'd be more folks here specifically from the child welfare, economic development space. Like, feel free to remix the question as it applies. What can you offer others as a group of organizations who are in motion together?
Ali, I just Googled you really quickly. Are you in Austin, Texas?
Yes, I am.
I found your creative musings. I was like, you're a graphic designer. I was like, I need to connect with Ali. But I think at least what I can offer as someone who's like worked in different movement spaces, racial equity, LGBTQ now in transnational racial equity work, it's just like, it's like we're a fellowship program. We just bring people together, and so I think if ever there's like, just making I think I can make myself available to folks who are like, hey, you're connected to this person, and so like, could you give me an intro? So I think my organization, what we do is we talk about like how manifestations of anti-Black racism and white supremacy, it manifests on all levels, but what we try to do is draw connections, from like local instances to like how it manifests in different countries around the world. So if ever that is helpful, Ali, to your work in Austin, we've got some folks in San Antonio. We've got some folks in Dallas, and Texas needs a lot of love right now. So anything that we can send you from, I'm in Brooklyn, so I say that from the comfort of almost like a progressive bubble, but anything I can do to, Austin is too, but anything I can do to offer support, it's more than, and I'll drop my email in the chat.
Awesome. Yeah, and I so appreciate that. So I actually work remotely, and so MFP is like mostly, or the work that we do is like mostly based in New York, specifically like we work with like Bronx Defenders and like
Nice.
so yeah, and they're so awesome. But yeah, like I appreciate that though, because like as I've learned about, what's happening in New York or like what we're doing, I'm kind of like in Austin, I'm like, all right, like what do I do here though to like be involved and actually like making a difference or whatever. So I'm copying and pasting your email, and I'm gonna put mine also in the chat for anybody.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's just like share resources, right? So it's like, one thing I'm trying to get our folks to do is just like build in a practice of, hey, we're going to speak out on this thing. Here's what our framing is, just so that so that way you're not like, what are they saying, or why are they saying that? So just so that people kind of know where we're coming from. And if we could just kind of like, just have at least that base level of understanding, it puts other organizations in a better position to not feel like they got to critique me, like in the defund situation. And I think the defund thing is really interesting because some people would argue that it didn't work, but I would argue that it did work in the instance that we are talking about. One, there have been like divestments of police budgets or like reductions in police budgets, and one. But then two, we're actually having a real conversation about safety and like public safety and community safety, and really looking at like other cultural practices for safety, right? So like not just looking at the police to understand safety. So I think defund was successful. So I'm always here to talk about that.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And as a counterpoint, I'll offer that in New York City specifically, it feels like the defund backlash is like, oh, and urban cities everywhere, oh, there's a rise in crime. Everything is super dangerous. Wherever you go, you're gonna get robbed on the train. You're gonna get shot on your block. You're dining outdoors. Oh my God, you might get robbed. And so, and they're like, oh, you want to defund the police now? Now you want to defund them? Creating this hysteria that and taking these kind of extreme stories and centering them is something that's the norm.
Gabby Petito.
Creating fear. Huh?
Gabby Petito, I'm just gonna say it.
Right. So, creating this like sense of fear. We have 1 minute together. I'm gonna kindly ask, we have a 6-question post survey. It's super short. If you can fill that out, that'd be awesome. We really do look at the data to see what worked well and what didn't work well, and what suggestions you have. So I'm gonna drop the link one more time. We tried to make it as short as possible. So please do complete that for our final minutes together. Thank you so much. And Darryl, just so you know, as a new board member, Movement for Family Power is a grantee of ours through our increased spend dollars.
Oh, cool. Great. Awesome.
Yeah, so they have a 1-year grant from us.
I will definitely look into that.
And thank you. Deep gratitude all. You all have the link to the form, and it is 4 o'clock, and I will respect your time. Have a beautiful day, people. Take care.
Thank you so
Nice
much.
to meet you, Ali and Mary.
Yeah.
Nice
Great to meet you all. Bye.
Thank you, Nyoka, for holding us.
For sure. Bye.
It was amazing. Thank you.
Mary.
Thank you.
Bye.